weekend also saw the return of sports, and it was a full political statements from everywhere, really, from the WNBA players walking out during the anthem, wearing, say, her name to honor Breonna Taylor, to baseball players sharing a black ribbon and taking a pre-game knee. And the question is, has the tide turned on accepting sideline protests? I'll start with you, Sonny. What do you think?
Well, I think there's no question about it. And, you know, athletes and activism have that's been around for a very long time. And I think people understand that. They've embraced it. You know, we go back to, I think, as far as I can remember, but certainly the 1968 Black Power salute with Tommie Smith and John Carlos. You think about Muhammad Ali and Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. You think about Michael Jordan, who you know, notoriously really didn't come out and said, even during the Last Dance documentary, I'm not a politician. He just came out in May 2020 with a tweet saying, you know, enough is enough, and speaking about racism. Colin Kaepernick was one of the first in recent times to sort of, you know, restart this kind of movement. But athletes are coming out all over right now and standing up and being much more political, and I think now is the time to do it, and I think it is being embraced.
Right. So, Joy, do you feel that there's a problem with players who maybe didn't take a knee, like Giant player Sam Coonrod?
I believe he didn't take it for religious reasons, he said. I think that's just fine. I mean, look here's what we've come to. 3 years ago, this is what Trump said to a group of supporters during a campaign rally. Quote, wouldn't you love to see one of these NFL owners, when someone disrespects our flag, to say, get that son of a bitch off the field right now? Out, he's fired, unquote. Well, you know, you have 34 or 5 or so players and coaches kneeling, and one player decides not to do it. Why focus on that one person? The times, they are changing, and the tide is turning. You can't really, you know, say that we haven't made tremendous progress in the past 3 years in this particular area. So it's fine with me. Right. If he doesn't want to do it, he doesn't have to do it. There's a spontaneous movement going on.
Right. And you know who said if players want to protest, they should run for office? He said that apparently when he sat down with Dave Portnoy from Barstool Sports. But what struck you about that interview, Megan?
I mean, just the fact that he did it at all. Dave Portnoy is the head of a media conglomerate called Barstool Sports, which is huge and sort of it's not only just a sports company, but they also do very popular podcasts. There's one called Pardon My Take that my husband plays every single day. And what's interesting to me is he's sort of taking a page out of President Obama's Between Two Ferns book. He's doing interviews with more unorthodox people. He is reaching out to people who are sort of omnipresent in popular culture. And I watched the entire interview, and Dave had a very conversational interview with President Trump. He seemed very relaxed. He got hit pretty hard by journalists for not doing, you know, I don't know, an interview with a more serious journalist, even though he had just gotten off of doing one with Chris Wallace. And I actually thought President Trump seemed more relaxed in the interview. And it'll just be interesting to see what happens going forward, because even in the Barstool Sports family, in and of itself, there's a popular podcast host called Big Cat who started speaking about how he doesn't want his podcast, he doesn't want Barstool Sports to be politicized, and he'd actually been offered an interview with vice presidential or presidential candidate Joe Biden, and he said he didn't want to do it. So it'll be interesting to see how politics, which is obviously going back to baseball coming back in all realms of sports right now, it'll be interesting to see what ends up happening in the realm of sports media as well.
Right.
You know what struck
I mean, I think it's interesting.
It didn't strike me as odd at all that. Sorry, it didn't strike me as odd at all that he chose to sit with Dave Portnoy, because Dave Portnoy is such a controversial figure. I mean, he's had many of his employees quit because of racism. He called Kaepernick an ISIS guy. He said if you throw a head wrap on him, he's a terrorist. Over a dozen of women Barstool sports reporters refused to sit down with HBO because they feared rape threats. He's been on video using the N-word. And so it's not surprising to me that Trump would sit down with someone with that kind of reputation. I mean, people have called him a notorious racist. And then Dave Portnoy says that he's not going to be canceled. You know, he calls himself irreverent, but in fact, he traffics in racist and homophobic and misogynist language. And so, you know, I thought it said a lot that this president would sit with someone like that.